So this is part 5 of my how to build an iOS app with a Django backend. So on this tutorial, we're going to learn how to make a post request from Swift through a form that we built, and that should populate our backend. So here's the sample application, and here's the account list that we currently have. So this is the completed app. We're gonna click create a form. When they click on this form, it's gonna pull out the sheet, and it would have this form that we enter. So for example, we enter here stocks, categories asset, and let's say the balance is 35,000. Description NZ market. I'm just gonna put NZX wealth building, and when I hit save, this is gonna close that sheet and update the list. And if we go here and I just refresh, you would see that that record has been created. Cool. So let's jump into the code and how I was able to accomplish this. So make sure PostgreSQL is running, make sure your server is running, your Python server, and then launch your app, and you should be able to get back to where we left off. So there's a few tweaks I want to do here. First is I want to change a little bit on the model side. So back on Python, I want to add a new field here to expose, which would be the ID. Save this and go back to our Django REST framework. Should be getting the ID back. So since I'm getting the ID back, on my struct I need to update the same. So here and say let ID, and it's an integer, and go back to my view and change this now into a, actually now that it has an ID, I need to do the identifiable. Then from here I just change this to accounts, and let's try that again, and should be the same. Now I want to add some navigation view and some buttons at the top here, so let's start doing that. So from here I'm gonna just add a list view, and compile that, and that should push my content up. Next is I want to add a navigation view. So once the navigation view is created, that should have a big chunk of space in here. So under that view, I want to create a navigation title. Just gonna call this accounts navigation bar title, and also want to create a button. So you can see that has this nice navigation here title. So if I add a navigation bar item, let's say bar items trailing, and I'm gonna add a button in here which has an action and a label. So for the trailing action, I also want to hide and show a sheet or a new view. So to quickly do that, let me first create the image for it. So I say image. I'm going to call the system image for this button. I'm going to call the plus circle from the SF symbols. And if I quickly compose that, I should have that button in there. There's something on here that is not quite right. I should have this navigation appear down here on my list. So let's compile that again. Now that looks better. So you would see that there's a little bit of padding happening here. To fix that, you just need to add another modifier. So this modifier, you put it on the list section and you say list style, and say plain list style, and then compile, and that should fix that. So when I press this button, I want a form to appear. So I need to add some sort of state to track the state of that button. So if I do say state and then say show add, and I set this to false, inside this closure, I want it to call the show add and toggle. So I probably need a $sign here. So that should change the value of that. No, I don't need a $sign there. That should change the value of the show add from false to true when this is clicked. Cool. So the next bit I want to add is I want to add that presentation view. So after this here, I'm going to call the sheet, and nope, I don't want to call that. It's presented, and what I want here is the value of the show add. If it's true, present with the content. So the content for now, let's just create a view. Let's just call it form. I'll compile that. If I do here, you'd see that the form pulls up. So let's dismiss that. Let's create that form now. So to create that form, I'm just going to create a new struct and give it some attributes. So struct, I'm going to call it account add view. It's confirming to view, and it also has the normal body, some view, and let's return some sort of view from here. Let's say account form, and I'm just going to quickly add that and change this text form to that. Then refresh, call that. You should see that account form. So now we have that view. Now let's start building out the form. So the form that I want to do entails capturing the name, category, description, and wealth type. So I would need some sort of state to capture this value. So var name string, and then I'm just gonna copy and paste category, description, balance. Category, description, and balance. There's also wealth type actually. Let's complete the whole thing. It's called wealth type. Cool. So needs a space. So once we have that, I also want to have the presentation mode. So let's track the environment. So from here, say presentation mode, var presentation mode. So the reason I want to do this is I want to dismiss the form when I click on cancel or after I hit save. So I'm going to show that later, but let's build out the form. So let's add a navigation. Let's add a navigation menu here. And if I quickly save that, that should have like one big thingy appearing there. Oops, not viewable yet. I'm going to create a list, and I want to create a section. So on this section, I'm going to call this, change this to text field. I'm going to ask for an account name, and text would be name, and I'm just gonna on the category side, we created a picker. So let's create those categories. So if I do categories, and it's an array, and it's gonna accept the value asset and liabilities. Cool. And I simply want to create a picker. So this picker would accept for the selection. So if you select an item from this picker, I want it to assign to category. Cool. And for the list of picker, for items to iterate for this list, we're just gonna loop through this categories that we created. Categories, and it requires an ID, self, and for the text, it's just gonna be a $sign for itself. So let's build that and see how that looks like. And there you have it. So we have that list. And next, let's add a few more fields. So you have the picker. Let's add the balance. Let's add the probably wealth type. Wealth type was a picker, but I'll just do it as a text field for now. And let's add description. Cool. And I want to do something with this list. I want to create a list style as well for it. So list style, I'm going to say group list style. I do that, and our form is looking a bit better. And then let's add some navigation items on it. So let's navigation bar title, call it add account, and then for the buttons to appear, bar items. So we're gonna have both trailing and a leading. So maybe leading should go first. And it would have a view, comma. So let's fix this view. So for the leading view, I want it to have a button, and that button would have a value of cancel and some closure in it. So this is where we use a presentation mode. So if I do presentation mode, wrap value, dismiss, when I hit cancel, I want it to dismiss that view. And then for the trailing, let me just fix that. I want another button, but for this button, it's gonna call an action this time. So the action, it's gonna call closure, and for the value of the button, let me just call it save. So yep, so if I hit build, hopefully no errors. When I hit this and I hit cancel, it should dismiss it. Cool. When I hit save, this is the time we're gonna build a function that's gonna post whatever data we post in here and pass it to our API. So to do that, we need to build a function. So inside here, pretty much what we did on the content view where we had a load account, we're going to create a function which is post account. So let me copy this function and just paste it here, and I'm going to call this post account. And basically we're going to call the same URL the URL request would now be post, and this would require a HTTP body which is encoded, so we haven't done that yet. We're gonna do that next. And this dispatch queue, it's not doing anything at the moment, so I'm gonna just comment it out for now. What I actually want is once it's past the data, so this is also not an array, it's just gonna be one data. Once it's past the data, it should dismiss the view. So we have that. So now let's build the actual data that we're gonna pass. So first, let's call the account data, and this would be account, and this would have all the parameters for that data. So for the ID, this is auto incremented on our database, so just placeholder 0 because it's kind of required at the payload at the moment, so we'll fix that sometime. And for the name, just say name. Category, just say category. Description, say description. And wealth, let's say self wealth type. And then for the balance, this is an integer, but we're passing a string, so say self balance. Okay, and if it's empty, just pass in 0. And for created date, just pass in blank because this is auto created by Django as well, by our database. So next is we want to encode this data, so we say guard let. We want to encode it to a JSON payload, right? So we want to say transform the account data from our model into a JSON payload. So we say try, let's say JSON encoder this time, and you pass the encode and you pass the value account data. Else if it fails, say print failed to encode, and just return. And this time we pass this encoded data for the body. So if I save, that should be looking better, and this is gonna pass that encoded value and then make that request, so everything looks good here. Now for the save here, for the action, we needed to call the post account. So under closure here, say call post account. So when they hit save, it should post this data to Django. So let's try that out. So let's build it. Hit plus and say Dogecoin, and categories asset, balance, let's say is 10, wealth building, and say testing Swift UI. If I hit save, this should close it out, and we didn't get anything. It didn't close it out, so let's go here, and we got a bad request showing here on our logger on Python. So the reason it's failing is because post would require another header. So I'm just gonna copy this and paste, and this time we're gonna select set value, and content type should be application JSON. So let's try this again. If I build it, hit on that and hit say Dogecoin again, category is asset, balance is 10, say wealth building, testing from Swift, and hit save. That close it out. If I go back here, that was successful post, and go to Safari and refresh this, we should see that new item created here. But if I go back to my simulator, you would see I don't see the Dogecoin here. So it didn't do a fetch back to get the latest lists. So let's fix that. So let's go back to Xcode, and this time we're gonna create a function on this view which would accept a, so let's create var function. It's gonna create a function, and it's just gonna be void. Cool. What happened there? So what we're doing here is we're gonna pass the function from our parent component, this component, the content view. We're gonna pass it to the account view, and we're gonna pass the load account view. So what we want to do is after we make a post, we want it to call back that same function to retrieve the latest data back. So now that we created that function, let's go to account view, and from account view, content view, and then on this account add view, I'm simply going to call the function, and I'm going to pass it self and say load account. So I'm passing the function to the account view. When account view makes a post account, I want it to call the parent function again. So to do that, I go back here, wait, before it dismiss the view, I want it to call self function. So the load account function is passed to this child, and upon dismiss it calls that back and then dismiss this layout. So let's try that. So if I do this, I should have Dogecoin there, and have here and say Ethereum, and asset, and say whoops, 100 wealth building, testing, dismiss, and load. If I hit save, you would see that this is now showing. Upon save and dismissing, it's retrieving back the account list. So that was quite a lot to digest from this tutorial. Hope you like it. Stay tuned for the next video, where I'm gonna show some detailed view and how we could delete and update from Swift. So that's it for now. Thumbs up, thumbs down. Cheers. Have a good one.